Hello and welcome to Wild Soul Gatherings. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie and I'll be your host for Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. I'm very grateful for all you wild souls out there who've decided to join us today. I want to send a special thanks to each of you for taking time out of your day to join us and our guests as we talk about the many aspects of spirituality. To receive updates on our latest episodes, please subscribe and follow Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. A positive rating and comment is always appreciated. In the tradition of Happy Hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, perhaps an aha moment that will positively influence your life. Welcome to Wild Soul Gatherings. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie, and I'll be your host today for this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. Today on our show, we're going to have Mary and Anthony. They're the owners of the Positive Pineapple located in Cleveland, Ohio. Positive Pineapple also has a global following, especially in Australia. This show is broken down into 3 separate episodes, including a bonus meditation. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, Mary and Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We're happy to be here.
Yes, we are.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our conversation with Mary and Tony. Today, we will continue our conversation on cold water immersion, talk about quantum physics, resetting our nervous system, anxiety, root causes, and some tools to address that. We are going to jump into where we left off on part 1 with Anthony talking about cold water immersion and healing.
Because I became very aware of my nervous system. I could tell, oh my gosh, there's these things that are changing in the way things are being controlled, the way I'm thinking, the way I'm perceiving reality. And that all tied into my earlier awakening, my understanding that my perception informs my reality. However I look at it is, however I decide to look at it is how it is. So as soon as I started paying attention to that, the dopamine started changing. Body was still healing at a very fast rate because getting in the cold water, plus it works your vascular system. It was really powerful for helping me heal my high blood pressure is using the cold water because of how it works with the vascular system. You have 80,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. You could wrap that around the earth almost 4 times. How is that all controlled? It's controlled with something called smooth muscle, which is basically nearly billions of tiny little muscle fibers that open and close your blood vessels, constrict and dilate. Also, you have endothelial cells. Well, these things never really get used because we're running into our warm car or warm house. We're not actually spending time outside getting adapted to cold, and especially going into cold water, because cold water, that's why we use it. It works a lot better than cold air because it transfers heat 25 times faster than air, and it's about 830 times as dense. So it takes away your heat really quickly, the water does, way faster. If you just stood outside, which I do, I go outside and shovel the snow in just my swim trunks. I'm sure the neighbors love it. I get honked at sometimes and stuff, so that's fun. You know, being out there in the cold, you have to be out there way longer to get the same effects because of just how deep the water goes into the tissue of the body. It really shoves all the blood to the middle of your body. It shuts off all of the exterior blood vessels. It puts the body in survival mode, but this is a good form of survival mode because this is actual survival, not mentally generated survival from our incessant overthinking that creates tension and starts to open our sympathetic nervous system. This is working. You're actually teaching about how to face actual stress. And then when you do that, after you do that a whole bunch of times, you start to notice the things in your life that were stressful all of a sudden aren't so stressful. And now you want that cold water even more. And then you go in there and not only can you feel and connect to the water, you're grateful and you're thanking her. You start to become, like in my tradition, we see the water as a Mama Unyu, is what we call her, Mother Water. She's a very powerful, divine feminine nature being in our tradition. And water has memory, and it's a very powerful thing, and it can be cleansing and very helpful to you, especially if you're willfully connecting to it. Mm-hmm. That's why even like in, biblical terms, it's ask and you shall receive. You got to ask. There's stuff all around us within our energy field that's open and available to us. We're just kind of blind to it, and we don't know how to ask. So if we start to ask, and that's basically how we got here. We didn't know it was happening. It kind of happened organically. I was asking. I was pushing myself into the field and asking. I started asking these things I could feel around me for more information, and we both did. And as that happened, you start to connect to this field of living energy in which everything is made. The quantum field is what they call it now in this term, in this time. In the ancient times, they would call it the ether. In my tradition, they call it the kausai pacha. That means animating essence of all things is what it means. It means the same thing. It's all the same idea. But now we're living in a time where physics is proving mysticism. Especially now with CERN, the things they're doing, causing hadron collisions, discovering new particles and how things are going together. They're actually so far have been very instrumental. There's a lot of people out there that think CERN is something bad because of some stories that go around that they're opening up gates to hell and all these things. These people are actually very highly conscious people, and they are making changes to reality. That is true, but not in a negative way, in a very positive way, because what this will do was will help open the minds of more human beings, because most of us are held back by our understanding of science and what Google feeds us. So we believe that's our reality and our truth. So what happens when Google starts agreeing? What happens when mainstream things that people are connected to start to agree? What will happen is this will cause an injection of light and a massive awakening, and that's where we're headed. That's what's a lot of us are experiencing, like ascension symptoms and stuff now, and that's just because the frequencies of ourselves and the earth are rising. And as that rises, the hucha, or heavy energy that's trapped within our energy field, is starting to vibrate, loose, and rise. This is basically the stuff we've been repressing. And like how we were talking earlier, yeah, not everyone's aware of their trauma because they have an expectation of what it should be, instead of understanding that the majority of your trauma is trapped in your subconscious mind, and that's going to require you to connect deeply to your nervous system and potentially have to work with a medicine person like myself, and there's others that are capable of helping people access these places, because it's not time. In the higher dimensional mindsets, we're aware that time is not real, that this is all just different frequencies of reality we experience. Yesterday was a different frequency. It's not gone, it still exists. You're just vibrating in a different realm. But you have the capability to go back into these places. So technically, time travel is very much true, but it's not time. We can't look at it as time. It's just a frequency, like a radio frequency.
Incredible. You were talking, I just wanted to go, yeah, yay. It's like we've been waiting for this all to happen, and it continuing to happen. So Mary, I'm going to go backwards just a little bit, because you talked about anxiety, and Tony, you talked about ascension symptoms. For my perception, I feel like the anxiety seems to be increasing. Both in my professional life, my personal life, honestly, just having random strangers stop and share with you. People seem like there's just a lot of anxiety, and in some ways it's more paralyzing than maybe it was in the past. I listen and I talk and I read, and however that intuitive information comes to me, it has been my sense that a lot of this intense anxiety is because the energy levels on the earth plane have just been increasing. And, we have a lot of different astrological events and solar flares and multiple things happening all over the place. Or some people just watch too much news and, are on the computer too much. What are your thoughts about the anxiety and sort of what is driving what feels to me to be this massive anxiety in the world right now?
Yeah, we started noticing it with people just showing up and coming to us saying, either my anxiety is just increasing like tremendously, or people that had come up to us and will approach us and say, I've never had anxiety before, and now I'm filled with it, and I don't know what to do. And it's basically, with that rise in frequency, your nervous system is not tuned up. So your nervous system is your antenna to that source of frequency and energy out there. If you don't tune your nervous system, you cannot take in that it causes chaos, basically. Mm-hmm. People who have never experienced anxiety before are starting to experience it. We noticed early on that people were just awakening, having random awakening symptoms where they would just start noticing life differently and start asking questions, because people that go through these steps of awakening, you get to a step where, one, you feel lonely. You feel like there's nobody else you can talk to. That will cause anxiety. It'll cause you to think that you're crazy. The things that you're perceiving, the things that you might be feeling or taking in from, energy source will start to make you question yourself. But these are normal symptoms for everybody to go through this awakening. we're so lucky to be able to be there to help people through that, because we went through it ourselves. And like I said earlier, we were experiencing all this together, but even though we had each other, we still felt lonely at the beginning, and we kept thinking, where are all these other people that are experiencing or understanding what we're going through or what we're experiencing? Through, I think it was meditation, Tony said one time, we have to be those people. And that kind of swings back to you saying early to the party. We have to be those people for the other people that are, basically coming online and awakening and, having a growth in their consciousness, because people are, with that expansion of frequency and that increase in frequency, people are just waking up at very fast pace, and it's flipping their world upside down, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. But as far as an anxiety goes, I never was one for medication, so I never got on anxiety medication. When I started using the breath work, I started realizing, I sat in offices full of women around me. I would be at work, and as soon as my anxiety would start kicking in, people think anxiety is, this panic attacks. And no, anxiety is just incessive overthinking. You're constantly overthinking. You're identifying with those thoughts that are in your head, thinking that they're you. And you're falling victim of those thoughts, because it's basically ran by your ego, which is always focused on negative what ifs, the worst case scenarios. When really, when you start to get into your practices and start training your nervous system, you start, especially with breath work. Breath work is huge at creating space for you in between those thoughts, so that you can disconnect from them and know that those aren't who you are. Your thoughts aren't who you are. And that gives you this space for you to be able to start changing, not attaching, but taking that moment to bring your awareness to whatever the thoughts are, asking yourself, okay, why am I having these thoughts? And then you bring your awareness in, and that's when that moment you can change your thoughts, and you can change your direction and where you're going with your state. Yeah. And when I'm sitting at work, I'm finding myself being overcome with anxiety. I would literally just slow down. And I had women right behind me, and I would just slow down my breath as slow as possible and as quiet as possible, just the longest inhale and the longest exhale I could, and just slowing my heart rate down, telling myself that I'm safe, because your mind is constantly putting yourself in that fight or flight mode. So when you remind yourself that you're safe, you can go back into rest and digest mode, and it slows your nervous system down. And that was helping me through everything, bringing my awareness to, why am I having this anxiety? What is causing this? And at first I wasn't doing it. I was just using the breath work, and just using the breath to slow myself down, try to take control, say, okay, I did my breath work, and now I can move on with my day. But I kept finding myself in that same pattern, that cycle of anxiety over and over and over again every day. And then Tony brought to my attention, if you don't start asking yourself why, you're never going to break that cycle. So then I started implementing that question, which is so important, is to, when you're feeling overcome or overwhelmed with anxiety, to stop and just take a moment when you can. Sometimes when you're in those modes of anxiety, you're so overwhelmed that it's hard to bring your awareness in, especially if you're first beginning these exercises and these practices. Even if it's 5 minutes in or 5 hours in, as soon as you can bring that awareness in, to ask yourself, why am I having this anxiety? Or what is causing me to have these thoughts? Or even if you don't get an answer right at that moment, you're sending that question out into your subconscious, and it's going to come back to you at some point. And then every time you start to have anxiety, it gets easier and easier, quicker and quicker, that your awareness starts to come in, because you're actually training your brain instead of falling victim of those thoughts, that overthinking that occurs in our minds.
Which is all nervous system.
It's all nervous system.
Because that's like on the deepest level is what our biggest medicine is for most people, is training their nervous system, how Mary was saying. So we're beings of frequency, and we take in information from the field around us. That's kind of how this meat suit works. We're we're part of this being that has a nervous system. And that's the thing. People ask me, Anthony, you talk a lot about training the nervous system. Why is that so important? And I'll point out the obvious. Well, you're not actually experiencing reality. You're experiencing your nervous system. Everything that's happening that you'll ever experience and will experience is happening inside of you. That's really where it's happening, through this thing that you're able to sense reality with, or your idea of reality. And then that kind of most people are stumbled by that for a moment. What? And that takes a little while. But then as it kind of sets in and you start realizing, it starts off as a concept, but the more you allow that to bounce around in there, it's like, wow, that makes a lot more sense. And then when you start to realize that, then you'll start to realize that your nervous system is how you're taking in reality. If you can change the way your nervous system works, you're going to change the way you take in reality. Mm-hmm. So if you're having some issues, and that's typically where, anxiety arrives. So take it deeper. Anxiety is a word. It's a diagnosis. So if you go beyond the diagnoses and you go into the symptoms, what are the primary symptoms? I have incessant compulsive thinking. That's at the basis of all anxieties. I can't stop thinking. I can't stop worrying. And even when I'm not worrying, I'm aware I'm worrying is what's happening. Because the body, what happens is as soon as the mind goes into that sympathetic nervous system engages, fight or flight mode turns on, and now you're in a position to fight or flight, not to rest, digest, learn, none of those things, heal, cuts us off from our ability to heal. That's why we have so many health issues. That's why there's so many issues. It's just because people are trapped in the sympathetic nervous system is what's happening. And if you can learn how to start to change that by altering your nervous system, which at the deepest level, the things we do does. That's what breath work does at a very deep level. Not the first time you do it. You'll notice something in a big change the first time you do a really good breath work session. And, it's as it progresses. I've been doing it now daily, many times a day for years now, and I'm not going to stop because it's still growing. It still expands. In the beginning, it's funny. It fluctuates. It's hard to get your mind under control. The mind wanders while you're trying to breathe. It's because it's a form of meditation. This is how we find our way out. You have to be still. You have to bring stillness into the body. Even in biblical terms, be still and know that I am God. That's what this all means, because there's a lot of paradigms in religion that point to consciousness is what it is. You have to be still, because if you keep moving and doing and doing and doing, you're never going to be still. So what does the body do? It's a very intelligent system. It's going to hobble you. It's going to make you sick. It's going to do what it did to me. It's going to beat the crap out of you until you basically surrender. That's why I say, okay, I see I'm causing this with my thinking and my decisions. And you're able to start to back out of kind of anything's possible. We've seen some things that are just, I can't put any other word besides amazing or miraculous. I really can't say any other thing. It's up to each individual how it turns out and what happens, but the things we see, like we had a client today, and to watch her, to help her go back into her childhood, take some stuff apart, some things in her current marriage, and bring some light and information and understanding into some of the things and choices she may be making. To have this person so full of joy afterwards that my body's vibrating, and it feels so good and funny, and she starts laughing, and we start laughing because it's infectious. And we're just like, wow, and it felt so good. It made me cry a little. It was amazing. Yeah. So to just see what's possible for other human beings motivates me like nothing else to try to continue to. And then that big thing is teaching people. It's something easy, okay? I want to teach people how to breathe at the first point. If you'll do nothing else, I can promise you, everyone I've ever met, I've never met anyone that stuck with it that hasn't had some massive change. There's been a lot of people that started to have a change, felt so good they forgot about the practice, and then fell off. And then they're wondering, my life was doing so good. Now I'm being challenged. There's something wrong. Well, no, the challenges are normal. And if you're in your practice, it's going to be very helpful to you to overcome that hump. We got to have them. Challenges are inevitable. That's how this place works. People think that, I have a lot of people that are misguided that think if I raise myself spiritually, I'll no longer be challenged. I got news for you. You're going to have challenges like you ain't never felt before because you couldn't before. As we go up, as we ascend in frequency, we spiral and we revisit these things. And a lot of us, what happens is we end up stumbling over our ego because something will pop up that I've already healed that. I've already forgiven that. And I've already, and now some of these people will come to me and like, I don't understand what's going on. I'll be like, okay, let me feel around and ask you some questions. Like, all right, well, it looks like you're going to have to do some inner child healing. And they're, I've already done all my inner child healing. I did that X amount of time ago and everything. And I just let them vent for a few minutes. And then I kind of tell them, like, well, listen, that's great and everything, but you've never been here before. And like, oh, you're in a whole new place now. So what you're going to have to do is throw that away. Your resistance is showing you where you need to go. The resistance always shows us where we need to go. Just like how he's mentioning that quote earlier. I accept each moment as if I've chosen it. Wherever that resistance pops up in your body, it's showing you where you're not free. It's showing you where you're holding heavy energy in your body. And when we learn how to take out the heavy energy, just like I try to teach people in our videos and things we do, connecting to energy. If you can start to do that, even if it's just conceptual when you first do it, like not everyone feels it right away. Some people do, some people don't. But the thing is your intent. And if you intend for it to do it, after time, you start to connect. It starts to open up. It's just like, I make it like when you first started drinking out of a cup. They didn't just hand you a cup and you drank from it. You just poured it all over yourself. You had to learn. You didn't just get up and walk. You had to learn. This is the same thing. Connecting to our energetic field and our true essence is something that takes some effort. It takes some will and want to get in there. Because there's also a lot of people that think, I just sit here and wait for things to happen. Well, you can, but I guarantee you the suffering will be harder. That's the thing. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be that hard. You can. But there's things you can do to help yourself. But only the people that are ready to help themselves are the ones that are always going to show up. The ones that are there. Because otherwise than that, for most people, what we're doing is scary. It makes them afraid because it's outside of the conditioned mind. It's outside of the conditioned belief system. So it's pretty common, and there's no judgment for these people. I've actually had people come and work with me, and I'm very clairsentient. I can feel a lot. And so when they're with me, sometimes I'll be talking to them like, it's okay that you feel that. And like, how do you know that? I'm like, it's okay. And I'll be like, I can feel right now you think I'm crazy what I'm saying. And they'll be like, listen, you don't take that personal, do you? I'm like, of course not. It's not your fault. And then I confide with them and I tell them, hey, when I first was coming online and my clairsentience was turning on, I didn't even want to tell Mary because I was scared. I was like, there's supposed to be something wrong. There's something going wrong. I don't think I want to tell her, until it started to come in deeper. And then I really understood, until I started to really, I see what's happening here. I'm being communicated with by living a field of energy that's around me because I've shut off my mind from constantly being stuck inside of itself. Yeah. That's all we need to do. It sounds so simple, but it's so hard at the same time. It always makes me laugh because it's kind of like the story of Buddha when they were asking him, Buddha, how do you become enlightened? And he just laughs. It's too easy. It's too easy. I can't tell you. It's too easy. It's so easy. All you have to do is let go. It's so funny.
Well, and the one thing I want to touch on with the nervous system is part of the conditioning of, when we talk to people about how powerful breath is and how it can transform your life, we get the same reaction from people. I've been breathing my whole life. What do you mean? I've been doing this my whole life. And it's like, that goes back to your nervous system. We're taught that you can't control your nervous system. We're taught that you don't have control over your nervous system. For me, when Tony was going through his illness with COPD and the high blood pressure and everything else, gosh, you had all kinds of things going on, arthritis in the hips, all kinds of things. I had, all of a sudden, my body was just starting to misfire all over the place. 2 years of going to see every specialist and having multiple tests, sometimes done 2 or 3 times because everything kept coming back normal. I was starting to have pain, phantom pain that nobody could find on any scan, so I had exploratory surgery. And 2 years of this, I had probably like 15 or 17 symptoms throughout that span of time. And we actually figured it out because of a test that my neurologist ran. And
you're talking about dysautonomia, right?
It was dysautonomia. Yeah. When you have a high level of copper or heavy metal, it usually attacks an organ. Mine was attacking my nervous system and my brain. To have your nervous system under attack like that, and to just be completely misfiring and doing just the strangest things, to go from that, to go from feeling very, very lost and defeated because the medical system was, every time I'd go to a doctor and I'd start telling them why I was there that day, they'd get overwhelmed quickly and just say, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they'd cut me off and say, why, what can I help you with? And I would look at them and go, all of this. Like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my body. And they just wanted one symptom to treat with a medication. You know, through two years of that, I never took any of the medications because I had so many symptoms all on my own. I didn't want to add symptoms from medications. You know, learning to be able to have control over your nervous system after losing full control of your nervous system was a gift. You didn't have to twist my arm or drag me, or I just sign me up, because that was one of the most defeating, scary times of my life. And I had, through those 2 years, watched people online that had dysautonomia. And I watched them, and it was mostly women. Over 90% of them are women, usually in their reproductive stages or ages. I watched them every time they'd go to the doctor and they'd get put on a new prescription. Then they'd, be back a couple weeks later and they'd be still sick, or they'd go into the hospital and then they'd be in the hospital for a couple weeks, and then they'd have to have surgery. People were being put on food bags, So as this is happening and as my symptoms got worse, I thought, oh my gosh, that is what my life's going to become. Through the universe, we were able to figure it out. And Tony was able to figure out where I was getting it from and how to safely detox me. And when we started the detox, it was 2 days, and most every one of my symptoms was just gone. And it was amazing.
Wow.
When you talk about the nervous system, we're trained you don't have control over it and stuff. We don't even think about it. People normal day to day, you don't think about how important your nervous system is. You have no clue. We have no concept of how important it is. We're caught up in that day-to-day stress of everyday life and going to work and making money and paying your bills and doing this with your kids and making dinner. And we aren't taught how to properly take care of ourselves. Coming out of that and then getting into these practices that we realize, like, oh, we're training our nervous system. Even balance training. We've come across somebody where we met who teaches people balance training. That also is training your nervous system. There's different ways out there to train your nervous system. And we teach people all the time. We tell people, Tony says, I'm not your guru. I'm not here for you to follow me forever. We're here to teach you a very important tool so that you can help heal yourself. And then go out there, and through your healing, you're going to be able to help heal other people. And that is what this is all about. Helping people realize that we are all capable of healing ourselves and connecting to ourselves on a level that we're pretty much unaware of. And yeah, it is scary for a lot of people, but the more and more, through our experience with this, people that were frightened by it at first are starting to watching the comments of people in our live streams and on our posts, and
Awareness.
These people sharing their experiences of how much their life has changed. And so those people that were really scared of it are now curious about it. And sometimes it just takes people to go through a certain amount of suffering before they'll open their eyes to trying to help themselves more. And we're here.
Oh, that's
for
really
everybody.
beautiful. You know what? There's so many people who feel like they have no control, or they feel hopeless. And the beauty of this is it's not, and you're giving them the vehicle and the path to walk down and do it.
Right.
Wow, thank you. What a great gift. The other thing I wanted to ask about was energy sensitive people. I've heard that term a lot more about some people are just becoming more energy sensitive, and it makes more sense as I talk to people and things that are happening within myself as we're getting these new senses. I consider them, we're moving beyond our 5 senses. Can you talk a little bit about energy sensitive people and sort of how to manage that? Because I think that sometimes there are folks, or it could be any of us, myself included, who probably manage them in not healthy ways because they become intense or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our conversation with Mary and Anthony. Please join us for part 3, where I will conclude our conversation as energy-sensitive people, our egos, forgiveness, what is energy shielding, and the effects of creating separation. Listeners out there, can you share with them ways that they can get a hold of you, get onto your social media, different projects that you have out there? How can the listeners connect with you? I'm still a little bit in like la la land here.
That's totally okay. Me too. The first place that would be the best place to visit would probably be our website. Visit us at thepositivepineapple.org. It's really easy, positivepineapple.org. And you can go on there, and we have a direct link to YouTube there with a beginner's video, because that's always what everybody wants to know. What are you doing? Well, when you work with us, the primary thing I'm going to teach you and all people when they first start is how to breathe. Breathing is A1. That's the first thing we do to take control of our being. That's usually a lot of questions is when we do hook up Anthony and we have a private session. That's a common question. What does a private session look like? And then so my typical answer is, well, I don't know. It depends on what you bring, because I'm an intuitive, so I don't have like a method in which I typically do things. I know that we're going to talk, and I know that we're going to breathe. I know that we're going to connect to energy. I have no idea what medicines are going to come through. So I'm capable of all kinds of things. I do soul retrievals, entity removals, all kinds of different types of shamanic energy medicine. So whatever usually comes forward is what shows up in that situation. But you'll still have people, they want to show up and they have a list of things that they want to do, and usually as they tell me, I let them tell me the list, and I take the list out of their hands and I put it over here, and then we go into the thing. I was like, and I help them understand that expectations is not where you want to be. You don't want to have any expectations. That in itself will stop you or slow down energy. Yeah, so visiting us at the website's perfect. Mary built the website, which she did a really nice job, and it's really beautiful. I have no idea how to do that stuff, so she did awesome, and we love it.
So I just want to absolutely thank you guys for being here. Thank all of our listeners for taking time out of their day to join us. And most of all, I want to say to everyone out there, please embrace your wild soul. And thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Sandra. This has been beautiful.
I'd like to thank our guests for joining us for this episode of Wild Souls Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To find out more about our guests, how to contact them, or detail on this episode, please see our show notes. You can also visit us at our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We would love to hear from our visitors what you thought of this show, what you would like to see and hear in the future, questions you may have. Go to podinbox.com/happy hour for the spiritually curious. You can leave either a voice or traditional message for us. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.